I think we will get going. So good evening. My name is Kevin Lindsay, and I'm the chair of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. Really appreciate everybody coming here tonight. It's just incredible to see a turnout like this. This is our All Candidates Forum, Tackling the Climate Emergency. And thank you. That's someone's signaling that I should be a little bit closer to the mic. Is that a bit better? Okay. So, you know, just coming here tonight is really a form of action on your part. Remember that. That's just an important part of our jobs as citizens, as voters, to really ensure that the candidates that we're considering, the people that we want to put into office, are able and willing to come and engage in conversation with us about the issues that really matter to us. And obviously the climate crisis is one that is critical and top of mind for most of us. Before we jump into the main event, I do notice that many of you are wearing orange shirts tonight. And this is one of the ways we observe National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So thank you for that. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to just share a few words from an article by Jana Whale, published just a few days ago. Ms. Whale, who is Gitxsan and Cree Métis, leads Indigenous research and partnerships at the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions. She tells us that today, September 30th, is an intentional reminder of the colonial harms of the past and continued colonial harms of the present. Harms that started long before the residential schools era. And she talks about how harms began really when settlers first arrived and have continued in the form of harmful policies, Western ideologies, and status quo approaches to land and resource management that have collectively led us down a path towards a radical environmental shift. In this time of climate misinformation and with looming political uncertainty, she reminds us, make no mistake, climate change has been caused and perpetuated by colonialism. In fact, 2 years ago, the IPCC listed colonialism not only as a driver of the climate crisis, but also as an ongoing issue that is exacerbating communities' vulnerabilities to it. Ms. Whale tells us that in very real ways, what is decided today will influence tomorrow. The decisions that we make today will be passed down to the next generation and those that follow. To meet the challenges of climate change, we need to expand our thinking, our worldview, and to be inclusive of the interconnections between people and place. We need to acknowledge the interdependencies between reconciliation, climate leadership, and climate action. I'd like to now introduce someone who really needs no introduction, and you know that when people say that, they often go off and give a really long introduction anyway, but I'm not going to do that, guy. A lot of the folks here know you. You're an author and you're an activist and you're a co-founder of the West Coast Climate Action Network, among many other things. But tonight you are our moderator, so we really appreciate you coming out to take on that job. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to you. Guy?
Good evening, everyone. Just to get things going, we're a community of friends and neighbours, and I want you to look around, find someone you see who you don't know, and spend 1 minute each getting to know each other. Right now, just find someone you don't know and chat up, make friends. There's nothing more fun than other folks, right? This will also be my way of saying time's up or game over. Or so, do we have any first-time voters here? Hands up. Any first-time voters? Oh, you're all veterans, right? Any first-time voters? One first-time voter. Yeah. Only one first-time voter. How many undecided voters are present? Some, yes, some hands going up, not many. You're all stuck in the mud, made your mind up in advance. What's the point of doing all this, right? How many of you are willing to be persuaded and open to persuasion? There you go. Do we have any elected city councillors, regional directors, or school trustees here? Paul Manley at the back, and you are a school trustee? No, just the one. Thank you for being democratically so active. And did anyone bring Indigenous heritage with them? Indigenous heritage? Family background? Yes? You are? Great. Do you want us basically stand up and tell folks who you are?
Oh, my name is Edie Cartwright, and I'm a Mid-Island Métis.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Edie. So, yes?
I'm half Indigenous. I'm from the...
Rooney's half Indigenous. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm half.
Thanks. So the preceding rules, every candidate will get, each of our two candidates will get a 2-minute introductory piece, and then there's 11 to 12 questions. They'll each have 2 minutes, and the other one will have a 1-minute response. And we'll alternate who goes first for each question. And at the end, there'll be each one have a 2-minute summing up. Craig Darren Castle. And it is Craig Darren Castle. Would you like to go first or second? You go second. Sheila, you're opening up the evening. Sheila Malcolmson, everyone.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you to Guy for setting us up, and to Kevin for hosting. And great to be at the Legion. Especially important to be on Nanaimo First Nations territory on this day of reconciliation and of truth. I also want to give shout out to both of the former members of Parliament, both Manleys that are in the House, both Jim and Paul. I thank you for your service. On this day, thinking of the great fortune that we have to be living in as beautiful and rich and diverse a place as British Columbia, the strength of the ecology, the power of the environment, the greatest ecological diversity in the country, the deep responsibility that we have to protect nature, and also on this day thinking of especially leadership with Nanaimo First Nation, but the imperative and the commitment that all parties in British Columbia made to adhere to the rights, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and it being enshrined in legislation. Some of our most powerful achievements together on conservation have been in British Columbia because of that work with First Nations. That we got 17 fish farms out of the Broughton Archipelago, right? That was because Broughton First Nations approached the BC government knowing that we could move more quickly than the federal government could, and then at the last minute they came along. That we are working on conservation imperative, 30% of protected land and 30% protected water.
2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, not quite.
I'm getting mixed signals from the two timekeepers. But let me just say, there is work for us to do. We must do it together, and this is the imperative of our time. I'm grateful to the nations that we've been able to work with as a provincial government in order to fulfill our responsibility to protect. Thank you.
Is it okay if I sit? Yes. Okay. So first off, I would like to also express my gratitude for having the privilege of living, working, and playing on the traditional unceded territories of the Nanaimo people. I also wish to acknowledge our gathering on our National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. There's a word in the Cree language that I learned a long time ago, and it's tapanwin. And what tapanwin means is speaking with truth, precision, and accuracy. And this is a bar I set for myself. And if I fail, I will own it. I have the confidence in my party leader, Sonia First to know, to also do the same. I feel it is our duty to respect the wisdom of our hereditary elders. Without going too far down the path, it's clear that the Indian Act was created to erase the culture and traditions of Indigenous people. I believe it would do us all good to learn more about our collective history, as well as Indigenous governance, including the potlatch and powwow. In many Indigenous cultures, governance is embedded in both honor and celebration. This is what my vision for governance in British Columbia represents. It frankly frightens me when a leader of one of our political parties who is seeking election has expressed the intention of repealing our DRIPA, or our Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, wherein it is both expressed and implied that we have the duty to consult First Nations communities before undertaking any projects on their unceded territories. I hope this evening that I can impress upon you why I feel the BC Greens are best poised to tackle the climate crisis. I believe we have the platform, we have the expertise, and I believe that we are leaders in tackling the climate crisis.
Thank you. The first question is on community engagement. And Shirley, you'll go first, and then we'll alternate all these, right? If you become our MLA, or are re-elected as our MLA, what steps will you take to increase the public's understanding of just how serious the climate crisis is, and implications for the future of BC, nature, and all humanity?
I think it's really important that we educate the public, number one. I think it's really important that we communicate the science. We know we're in the middle of a climate crisis. When you look at what's happening around us, I mean, you look at what happened with the latest storm Helene, we still have 1,000 people that are unaccounted for. The intensity, the duration of these weather events is increasing. It's very clear that the science doesn't lie, that it is human caused. We need to express the urgency of the situation that we're in, but we also have to offer hope. And I think it's really important that the message goes out over and over and over again, because what's happening so often is as myths get communicated over and over and over again, they become accepted as fact. So I think it's very important that we do our jobs where we're communicating in the schools, in community associations, every opportunity that we have. It's important that we communicate the message. We are in a crisis. We have a plan, and we can tackle this, but we have to be targeted, and we have to be willing to think of different alternatives, and we have to be creative. Sorry. I saw the 30 seconds on there. So I think the big thing is communicating hope. We don't want people to bury their heads in the sand. We want them to give them tools, and we want to communicate our plan well, so people have faith that we do have a plan.
Thank you. Sheila.
The first thing is we are going to keep learning from and leaning on the fantastic community-based organizations like are represented here in the room, and the really powerful and effective NGOs that have been leading work around the world. We're really lucky in British Columbia to have direct, in our Climate Change Advisory Council, direct links to some of the very best minds and thinkers in the province. We're reliant on that. I will speak on, because the Conservatives aren't here, to say their approach is to remove school textbooks that even mention climate change. So that is what we are up against. Not only a party that does not believe in climate science, but is absolutely against education. I though want to make sure though that on the positive side, our vision is a climate-friendly future. It's one where kids learn, teachers have the resources to support, that we are investing and removing barriers to Indigenous ways of knowing. There's so much that we can do to bring people together, but I really loved what we call the guidance approach, is to give people the good news about when we take climate action, We employ people. We have better air quality. If we scare people about the perils of climate change, there are research studies that have told us people tend to get more conservative and shut down and become less generous. We've got a lot of good examples in British Columbia, a lot of ways that we can invest and do things in a new way, and we know that when people see a different path and a renewable path, then they can accept more of the imperative to take action.
No more frack methane.
Thank you. Shirley, do you wish to respond? You have a minute if you wish. Open debate time. And use the mic.
Okay, open debate time. I guess in terms of actual climate policy, one of the things that we know affects climate is what we're doing to our forests. We're clear cutting our forests at great speed, and what I'd like to know is what the NDP's plan is to stop the decimation of our forests. Second part to that is, do you have a plan to curb the fracking and the LNG?
In 1 minute, I'll say yes, the plan to act on old growth forests has been very well laid out, very well and documented and reported on regularly. There's tons of material.
You're cutting old growth trees right now.
Okay,
There you go. Okay. Order. Yeah.
There, 2.4 hectares of old growth forest logging has been stopped on it. We have legislated a complete reversal around the order of ecology in the way that forest policy is determined. There hasn't been, there's never been in British Columbia's history as much change in the way that the forest industry is regulated, and it is honestly mandate challenging. We are likely to lose seats based on the disruption in the economy, and as a party, we've decided that's the right thing to do. Ecology is first, that's now written into legislation and regulation. You are not going to find another government that has ever been in a position to implement and has used the tools available to us.
Thank you. Well, when we do the next question, and Shirley, this will be used. No, Sheila, you'll kick this one off. Today is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The BC government supports many great First Nations climate initiatives. If you become our MLA or are re-elected, would you change the way this support is given? The support we give to First Nations climate initiatives in BC? Or any comments on First Nations climate initiatives in BC?
The land back work that we have done, I think of Nanaimo specifically, but it's happened across the province. The return of autonomy on education, on the foster child system, on resource development, on just holding the land is a first. The relationship that at a government to government level that has evolved in British Columbia is powerful to see. And we are moving ahead. The Broughton First Nation fish farm removal is one example, but there's also a lot of proactive development that's happening as well. And this is a foundation that's going to take us generations to implement, but it is the way forward. It's how we've been able to open 2 new mines, or open one new mine and have another one on the way that are going to be the factories for batteries that help us have more domestic control for electric vehicles and battery storage. This is a partnership that is the only way that we can move forward in British Columbia, one that it's overdue, but I'm very proud to see.
Thanks. Shirley.
I guess my approach would be that we, especially in any projects that are on unceded territories or ceded territories, that we don't lead. We allow the First Nations communities to lead, the land guardians to lead, and we listen and we follow.
Okay, thanks. Any To and fro?
Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement here. I mean, that is what we're doing. This is nation-driven, and there are absolutely complications around who speaks for what nation, and these are delicate governance dances. But what we are looking for is to each nation for themselves to decide their own who is going to be their decision maker, who's their spokesperson. And because this hasn't really happened anywhere else in North America, we don't have good models to follow. Every nation, as Chief Wise often reminds me here, First Nanaimo, they have their own way of deciding what local resource decisions, whether they support a project or not. And so that's up to each of us as the local MLA to have that relationship with the local nation and be able to speak to it at the cabinet table.
Shirley, any response?
So I guess my one concern, and I realize that this has to come from within the communities and the First Nations communities, but that the hereditary elders have the right to weigh in, and they do need to negotiate that, I guess, between themselves, between the band chief and their organization, as well as the hereditary elders. It seems at times the hereditary elders actually get overlooked, or sometimes they get marginalized in the conversations, so I think it's really important that they are invited to the table.
Thank you. So next question is on who pays for the cost of the climate crisis, and you'll go first, Shirley. In 2023, BC had to pay more than $1.1 billion to fight climate change-driven forest fires, breaking yet another record. Would you support seeking legal compensation for a fair share of the harm caused by the fossil fuel industry by suing big oil, as California, New Jersey, and other states are doing? And if not, what's your solution to prevent taxpayers from bearing all the costs of the climate crisis? You go first, Shirley.
I do think it's important that we hold industry's feet to the fire. When we can prove that they are causing harm, it is our responsibility to seek damages. And industry that we know is causing harm. We know the fossil fuel industry is causing harm, and we do. First of all, I think we need to cut the subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, but then I think it is our responsibility, and they have to take responsibility, which they often don't do when they're capping off their wells and whatnot. They don't take responsibility. Very often they pull up their tent pegs and they leave us with a mess. So I think we need to do a better job of holding them to account and holding their feet to the fire. If you want to do business in this province, you need to take responsibility for the messes that you make.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well said. We passed in British Columbia the Climate Change Accountability Act. That was with the support of the Green Party. And polluters do pay and have to pay. We've already eliminated the largest fossil fuel subsidy, which was the deep well royalty credit. We charge an annual levy on the industry to pay for the cleanup of orphan wells to ensure that those costs don't fall on people when the big companies go bankrupt. We now require jet fuel suppliers to incorporate low carbon jet fuel into fossil jet fuel. We are a leader in sustainable aviation fuel regulations. We've had the low carbon fuel standard in British Columbia since 2010, so that was put in place by our predecessors. But every year, a lower amount of carbon is required, and that actually has had more impact on climate change emissions than the carbon tax had. And those credits also fund the electric vehicle rebates, and so that doesn't actually come from taxpayers. It's paid for by polluters. So in a whole a suite of initiatives that make sure that polluters pay, there's absolutely more for us to do. And again, this is all work that Raskav has said that he and the Conservatives will rip up and repeal if they are elected government. That's our greatest risk to the climate, and that's work that we are determined to prevent them from doing. Thank you.
So before you go to and fro, the question specifically, West Coast environmental law is starting a program to literally sue Big Oil. It's a legal case to recoup damages. Would you push for the government to sue Big Oil legally? Question to both of you. You go first.
I'm familiar with their work, and it especially has moved through the local government realm, and really am encouraged to see the debate there. I'm familiar with the tool. When I was first in cabinet, we used it to sue opioid manufacturers for the cost of the toxic drug crisis. And British Columbia previously used it successfully against the tobacco industry. So I'm not going to preempt what the Attorney General might decide to do in this regard, but it's certainly an active and intriguing policy proposal that I'm grateful to West Coast Environmental Law for advancing it.
Thanks. Shirley?
I definitely would pursue litigation against Big Oil.
And do you want a minute each to and fro debating on this one? Anything else to add? Okay. So, Sheila, yes?
I guess my thought process is I would go back to the carbon tax. You as an individual, Sheila, would you support retaining the carbon tax?
Not if it loses the election and our entire climate plan, no.
A minute each, so do you want any response on this? Okay, the next question is on fracking and LNG, and starts with you, Sheila. BC has passed a legislated commitment to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030, and then to achieve zero net emissions by 2050. BC is also enabling 6 LNG proposals. A recent report from Clean Energy Canada showed that if all 6 projects go ahead, their emissions in BC alone would consume a full 40% of the province's 2030 emissions target, and require electricity equivalent to 8 new Site C dams. And that's just on emissions in BC. How do you reconcile this huge contradiction? And your first, Sheila.
So the Climate Action Plan is the ceiling for any of this work. LNG has to fit inside the emissions cap of our Clean BC plan. Any applicant with proposed LNG facilities has to pass an emissions test, has to have a plan for zero emissions by net zero by 2030. And if the cap is not met, then the project does not go ahead. That's the bottom line. Other ways that we are also mitigating impacts. We took another step this summer in strengthening our methane regulations. We're on track to meeting our 2025 target, which is a 45% reduction in methane emissions, 75% by 2030, near elimination by 2035. And NGOs like Pembina, Environmental Defense, and David Suzuki Foundation have been noting the new regulations as really significant progress. Also ramping up renewables, which we'll talk about in more detail, I think is also part of the plan to keep emissions down. And again, this is all wiped out by a Restad Conservative government that would rip up the Clean BC plan and would advance projects without the regulations I've described. That's what they say they'll do.
Thanks. Shelley.
I guess I harken back to the 2022 Supreme Court ruling that the observations made by the justice that to date we've had a dismal record of meeting our climate targets. Honestly, I can't see how we can possibly meet our climate targets by pursuing these projects. In my world, I think we need to wind them down. We need to move away from the fossil fuel industry as quickly as we possibly can. I realize there needs to be a transition, but it needs to be a quick one. We know, COVID showed us, when we need to turn on a dime, we can. And we did. And we can do it again.
Response? You've got a minute to respond, Sheila?
I'll say the northern nations that have advanced in partnership, a lot of the LNG projects tell us that these are projects that they want to see go, and that they're employing people in a way that they don't have other opportunities. When I talk to local indigenous leadership, they say this is actually what reconciliation looks like. Please don't step on our plans and tell us what we can and can't do in our territory. I recognize that, for example, Haisla First Nation fought very hard against Enbridge Northern Gateway, extremely hard. They saw the risks to their waters and their way of life, and yet they have embraced and are investors in LNG. And it is, I'll say, if this was a project that was really close to home, I might be fighting it with all of my will, but and as I did the Kinder Morgan TMX pipeline project, this is such a delicate conversation. I really appreciate what you're saying, Shirley. I absolutely appreciate it. And I also know for nations that haven't been able to advance projects in their own territory, then sometimes the conversations locally look different.
Shirley.
So I guess just one of the observations that I would like to make is that very often the First Nations communities jump onto some of these projects because they've been starved out for generations. And when they see a way to lift their communities out of poverty, they're going to reach for them. That doesn't mean that this is the best tool for them to lift their communities out of poverty. And I think the thing is giving them different options, giving them the opportunity to invest in renewables and supporting them, and giving education to their young people, and bringing them into the 21st century, rather than just saying, well, this is what's on the table, this is what you can take, and we'll give you the crowns. And even when when the proposal comes on the table to repeal DRIPA, that's frightening, because basically what's happening there is, if we repeal DRIPA, that means that Indigenous communities will never have sovereignty over their land. They'll never have autonomy. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind as well. We don't have a Conservative representative at the table here tonight, but I think it's really important that we keep that in mind as well.
Thank you.
I'll just say, with the greatest respect, that description of, although I think that it comes from a good place, the description that I've heard of nations not being able to make good decisions I've heard also described back to me as the same kind of patronizing or colonial thinking that has happened in the past. And so again, none of this is black and white, and I just think the language, we just have to be so careful. And again, I say that with respect.
I'm just to throw in a quick fact check here, that among the Nishka proposing the Cedar Seams project, the Nishka people themselves have been holding meetings to try and stop it, and the Gatanyo people are suing them to try and stop it locally because it's on their territorial lands. There's huge conflict within the Nishka as to whether this should go ahead or not. So there is difficulty in making those decisions. Anything you want to add? Okay. So follow up to this one. Would your party support binding pollution targets on the oil and gas sector to reflect the urgency of the climate crisis? And Shirley, do you want to go down that one?
Yes.
Do you want to say more? Shirley, you obviously have 2 minutes for binding pollution targets on the oil and gas sector.
Yes, and we do, and we legislated binding targets into legislation, and we passed the Climate Change Accountability Act. And we have also, I think the other part of the, are you going to ask the other part of the question about?
This was a follow-up to the LNG and fracking one, as part of the same question.
So, in addition to legislating emission reduction targets, we're also really trying to work to build up the other forms of energy that don't need to have such type of restriction, because they are not as damaging. That we are home to British Columbia's only renewable diesel production facility in Prince George is important, and that's a BC first. That we're home to over half of the hydrogen technology in the entire country is important. That Parkland Refinery in Burnaby is now producing test runs of sustainable aviation fuel. That's also a local innovation that we've been supporting, and our entrepreneurs and innovators are really important to that. But maybe the most exciting thing, which is new news, the call for power that BC Hydro put out a couple months ago, it was looking for 3,000 gigawatt hours of renewables. It received 3 times that amount in bids. And so that tells us that industry is really ready to go here in BC, and we're extremely encouraged by the entrepreneurialism and the innovation that's letting that happen in partnership with our government.
Shirley, any response? So I just want to throw in a quick fact check here. Building the 6 new LNG plants will require electricity equivalent to 8 new South Sea dams. So the solar plants, etc., that BC Hydro is encouraging will be used to electrify the process of gasification of fracked gas to export to China, not to generate renewable energy, because 8 times the size of South Sea is a gazillion vast amount of energy needed for the LNG plants.
Actually, I do want to comment on that.
Yeah.
And then we would actually be burning fossil fuel to cool the gas, to liquefy gas as well.
Do you want to respond to the burning fossil fuel to liquefy the gas?
The question that you asked was about binding regulations, which we do.
Yes.
And the call for proposals is everywhere in British Columbia for renewables. It's not a call for proposals by the LNG sector to generate their own electricity.
Yeah.
This is us generating power for British Columbians.
Okay. And a fact correction for you, Shirley. The intention of the BC government is that the LNG will be clean in as far as it will use electricity to cool the frack gas down to the temperature needed, minus 63 Celsius. The flip side of that is that there's 10% more gas available to burn in China. Yeah. Next, we're on to the next question. Sheila, you're first on this, on economic resilience and the cost of climate. A 2022 study found that if we don't address the climate crisis rapidly, it will consume 18% of the global gross domestic product, or GDP, by 2050. GDP represents the whole economy. Around the world, to win World War II, governments spent between 40 and 50% of GDP. And to beat COVID, they spent 15% of GDP. Economist Nicholas Stern has said that governments should spend and invest up to 2% of GDP a year to tackle the crisis and prevent the worst aspects from happening, and to build instead a green renewable energy economy. Would you support spending and investing up to 2% of BC's GDP to tackle the climate crisis? Sheila first.
So the investments that British Columbia has been making in climate resiliency, that we now have Minister Bowen Ma that's completely committed to and dedicated to climate adaptation and emergency response. It's necessary. We probably needed it quite a while ago in British Columbia. And that we have been working in ways that benefit, again, ecology, community safety, and climate adaptation, rebuilding salmon habitat, looking at the natural flow of rivers and streams so that they're not running through channels anymore. We saw the real damage and danger in Abbotsford, for example, at the time of the extreme flooding. And that is, again, one of those win-win-wins. The percentage of investment, that's a decision for the finance minister about exactly what percentage of the province's GDP goes to this work, but we certainly see British Columbia on the forefront of both feeling the impacts of climate change and then also innovating and developing responses. And so we've already proven our commitment to spend on protecting the environment, on investing in renewables, in working for both climate action, adaptation, and mitigation.
Thank you. Shirley, 2 minutes.
Sure. So I think if we don't spend 2% of our GDP, I think we're in trouble. Because really, if we don't invest now, there will be no future to worry about. Our climate crisis is taking a toll on us in every way possible, in terms of our environment, in terms of our costs of living. Our costs of living are going up, our insurance rates are going up, our food supply costs are going up, everything is going up because of climate change. But there's also our quality of our life and even ability to live in a planet that continues to heat up. So 2% is, to me, the starting point of what we need to invest. And we have lots of things that we can do. We can invest in new technologies, we can invest in education, getting people transitioning into different industries where low impact to no impact industries. We need to move in that direction. We need to invest in people, we need to invest in planet.
Thanks. Sheila.
I'll use my rebuttal time to again speak for the Conservative member who's not here at the table, and to quote some of the things that John Rustad has said, like climate change science is a lie, that's in quotes, and quote, we should not be trying to fight climate change, end quote. He's promising to rip up the climate agreement that we wrote with the Greens. He's intending to send BC back to clear-cutting old growth. The risk here is extreme. His commitment to ending climate action and ending conservation is the real risk that we face right here today.
Thank you. Shirley?
Well, I'm still going to drone on about the moving away from fossil fuels. I think it's an imperative. This is not optional. We can't meet our targets if we don't.
Okay, so next question is on extreme weather, and you'll be first, Shirley. During extreme weather events, which are becoming more frequent and more extreme because of the climate crisis, and if you see what's happening in Western Carolina at the moment, it's just absolutely unbelievable. The impacts of a hurricane that far inland, 600 people unaccounted for on top of the 120 dead. Becoming more frequent and more extreme. How will you ensure that BC better protects the vulnerable, including the elderly, people with disabilities, and those who are unhoused? And does your party have plans to prevent further deaths, destruction of property, and economic loss caused by the climate crisis? Shirley, you're first.
Well, I think our plan to invest in 26,000 new homes and investing in below market homes, investing in social housing, investing in co-ops, getting people off of the street needs to be one of our priorities. Because when we're outside, we have no protection from the elements. And once we're inside, then we also need to be looking at things like heat pumps and looking at air conditioning units, making sure that people have the basics to keep them safe. We need to be investing in these things. We can't just leave people with no means to keep themselves safe, so we need to invest. And I think that our housing strategy is a very good one, it's a very robust one, and it will help to get a lot of people housed.
Thank you. Sheila.
Thank you. Yeah, we really see the impact of 15 years of underinvestment in housing, in income assistance rates, in long-term care, really playing out on everything that the pandemic revealed. Homelessness, vulnerable seniors. And so it has been really important to accelerate and step up investments for vulnerable people across the map, but especially during something like the heat dome. So we tripled funding for free portable air conditioners for seniors especially. Now more than 28,000 air conditioning units have been provided across British Columbia. Improvements to long-term care and assisted living homes to make things more comfortable and safe for seniors, including heat pumps, has already happened. Implementing a provincial coordinated heat alert and response system, which is also aimed at people with language barriers, seniors who don't use technology, homeless people who don't have regular connections, and funding communities so that they themselves can invest where they best know that they need extra help in the event of these kind of climate-related emergencies. $217 million in that area. And there's absolutely more to do in every one of these areas. I'm grateful that Minister Bowen Ma is leading this work, but it's something that is happening across government and has to continue.
Thank you. Do either of you want to respond to the other? Okay, so the next question wasn't in your, it's about forests, and it wasn't in your, it is in your one, this one, yeah. About forests. In 2021, the government appointed technical advisory panel recommended protecting much of the province's old-growth forests, conclusions which the government fully accepted. 3 years later, less than half of the recommended deferrals have actually been deferred. What will you do to ensure their immediate deferral? And this is, Sheila, you're first on this one.
Thank you. Yeah, it was work that was necessary, absolutely. I'm grateful to Al Gourlay and the second panelist who issued the report that we've already stopped logging on 2.4 hectares of old-growth forest. Has been significant and important, and it was always done in partnership with First Nations. To have embedded ecosystem approach now in forestry, and that's locked in legislation and regulations, has also been important. To have funded further with First Nations a purchase and co-protection of 30% of land and 30% of the forest by 2030 is something that I was just so encouraged to hear Endangered Ecosystem Alliance Ken Wu say huge kudos for that, but also for Ken to say, quote, "We are on the precipice of the biggest protected areas expansion in British Columbia's history, but it may be cut short if the BC Conservatives get in," end quote. So again, I'll take the spot of our Conservative member who's not here tonight. John Ristad and the Conservatives think there is too much land conservation and too much protection in British Columbia. They would reverse our progress to protect watersheds and forests and wildlife habitat, and that is a risk we cannot take.
Shelley.
I guess my one observation I would make is that we know that we've been over-harvesting in various areas, and we need to adopt a more, in terms of how we forest, we need to change the industry. The industry really needs to change. We need to go to a model such as ecoforestry, where we are doing selective logging. We can't continue logging at the rate we have been. We just can't. And when we look at the value, this is the thing, is when we look at the value of an intact forest versus a clear cut, if you're looking at straight dollars and cents, tourists don't come to the island to walk through trails littered with clear cuts. They come here to immerse themselves in intact forests. And so we can't just keep taking an extractionist perspective on the value of our forests. We need to appreciate that they are living systems. We understand now how these systems work, and they need to be intact. We can develop an industry where we do selective logging, that we're more careful, and that our forests will remain intact for generations to come. It needs to be mindfully done, and we need to start educating forestry workers who will come and do forestry in the future as well. In the schools, we need to start teaching eco-forestry principles.
Thank you. Sheila, do you want to respond?
Well, I'll say I agree, and that's exactly the work that we've been doing. Protecting forests embedding the ecosystem approach into the forefront of every decision, and doing the work with First Nations. Investing also in jobs and in the transition for people that can work in the sector, can do more value-added work, cannot be completely thrown out of the transition away from old-growth logging, because that is happening. And again, all of this is at risk from a conservative government that says that they will throw all of this protection out, that there is too much protected land in British Columbia, and that they will reverse our steps on protecting old-growth forest.
Shirley, any response?
Just one observation I would like to make, just in terms of how we envision our forestry industry. We really need to focus less on shipping our raw logs out of the country and sending the jobs with them. And we also need to be focusing on creating downstream industry. I have a beautiful drum sitting at home that was created by an artisan here on the island. There's so much value in our an opportunity in creating craft industries versus extracting and shipping our raw logs out of the country, sending the jobs with them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Shirley, and that's why we've made a colossal investment in mass timber, that we are building wood into our structures, so we've changed the building code and so that buildings can be higher. This is a way to lock carbon in place, that it's a part of every decision, of every investment that we're making. Affordable housing, childcare centers, new universities, the new student housing, to embed BC wood into them, and the construction, training people to be able to do that work, part of every investment that we're making. And then absolutely locally, we see some really great examples of this. You know, to have Coastland and Carmack and others that are doing this value-added work. Very frustrating. I totally share your frustration with raw log exports. This is something that we have had locked in from free trade agreements that the federal government signed, and anything we can do to come as close to the edge of preventing raw log exports without triggering a softwood lumber dispute is always the dance that our NDP government has been doing, and one that we'll continue to do. I wish we didn't have avenues locked off there. It would be great if we could with federal cooperation.
I guess our one observation is that we do need to be lobbying the federal government as well to work on the agreements.
So I just want to push you both on one point, because the question was that only half of the recommended deferred old growth has been deferred. What will your government, if you're elected, do to rapidly ensure that the remaining old growth is protected? Sheila.
Yeah, I don't know that fact to be true, and so that's something that, and I know we have regular reporting, I just didn't get to that report today. It's certainly a commitment that our government has made, but because each deferral area is done with First Nations, that was a commitment that our government made. Sometimes we can only go as fast as the local decision-making council has made, but I'll assure you, if our government and cabinet is returned, we have a lot of people inside our caucus that are there because of environment, as I am. So we know that we are pushing as fast as we can, but in some cases at the speed of trust with Indigenous leadership.
Thank you. Shirley, any final response, and then we'll move on? Anything?
Yeah, I would say that I agree that we would be pushing it as quickly as we possibly could to enact all the deferrals.
Thank you. So the next question is on food and farming. And I'll premise this by saying that in the West Coast Climate Action Network, we set up a team to try and develop clear climate solutions on food and farming, and we failed to do so because the fight within the environmental community was so hard, right, about animals. The question is that food and farming are responsible for 25% of the world's climate pollution. And the livestock industry alone is responsible between 14 and 16% of emissions, as much as all the world's transport. Eating a more plant-based diet and reducing the food we waste are two very effective ways of reducing our food-based climate pollution. What would your government do to incentivize and promote these behavioural changes? And Shirley, you're first on this one.
I don't know that we can incentivize it, but we can, through public education, we can encourage people to move towards a more plant-based diet. In terms of, I think for a lot of people, like when you look at your tradition, how you're raised, and the diet that you're familiar with, you may be reluctant to try different diets, because as we educate people and they start to learn that they can get the same nutrients out of a plant-based diet, I think it's a real education piece, really. I don't know that you can incentivize it, other than having the feeling that you're doing the right thing, or that you are making a difference in terms of the planet's ecology. I don't know that there's a way that you can actually incentivize it, because people do have rights to eat the diet that works best for them. Some people need actually nutrients, or believe that they need nutrients from certain food sources. And I think that we have to respect the rights. And two, in terms of culture as well, we need to respect culture and cultural systems.
Thank you. Sheila.
Our approach has been to connect people with as much fresh, local, nutritious food as we can. That's something we've been taking action on from the beginning. We've learned so much from Loaves and Fishes and the really enormous work that they've done here in our community of rescuing food, preventing food waste, offering organic bread to chicken farmers if it isn't something that people want to eat. It's really been inspiring. Almost 22 million pounds of food that Loaves and Fishes have diverted from landfill. We are one of their funders, especially in my role as Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. I have the food security lead. We've done a lot of this work, and we've mirrored Loaves and Fishes model out to other food banks as well. Also, a really important initiative that we've taken action on is funding local foods for some hospitals. So certainly the patients get more nutritious and quality food, right? So that's been a really good pilot project that we're really determined to expand. And another one has been the farmers market coupons. I'm grateful here in Nanaimo to Nanaimo Food Share for being one of our partners to identify who are the people that are lower income that wouldn't otherwise be able to buy organic, fresh, local vegetables at the market, right? So another example of, I know that when I buy a $6 thing of organic carrots, it does not go bad in my fridge. It just won't. And so but these are all ways that we can support local economies, support the amazing young people who are farmers, prevent food waste, prevent the emissions in landfill from food waste, but also connect people with more local, nutritious, healthy food.
Want to come back, Shirley? Anything else?
Yeah, in terms of composting and in terms of composting our food waste, I think that's really important. And composting education, I think, is very helpful. I had another point and it slipped my mind. But in terms of it's gone.
Let me ask both of you, would you support the government which requiring that schools, hospitals, prisons and the legislature serve a minimum number of plant-based recipes, dishes in our hospitals, not just local food, but plant-based food in the hospitals?
I don't see legislating something like that. I certainly see the benefit of expanding, as we have been, local foods and local farmers and non-corporate food growing for our government institutions. And I have been very happy to defer to the nutritionists that advise our education and health authority system for them to provide menu options for people that are culturally appropriate, are healthy, and I think that in this day and age, really vegetarian options are almost always made available and should be, but I don't see that as a role for government to legislate it.
Okay, thanks.
I just the one observation I'd also like to make, just in terms of giving people options and getting people thinking differently too. Like I said, we can be pretty entrenched in our thinking based on the way we've always done things. So I think it's really important to expand people's knowledge, food knowledge and nutrition knowledge. Also, I just wanted to point out too, I don't know that people are always aware of the fact that our farmers markets actually generate millions of dollars to our local economies. So I think it's really important that we give credit where it's due. Farming is very often a thankless job, and trust me, I know because I was raised by farmers. It is backbreaking work, but we contribute a lot to the economy. So, and we have our local farmers to be thankful for that. And if we can encourage our agricultural industry to move away from industrial farms and fund or help subsidize young farmers who are trying to enter the market, because there are so many barriers in terms of costs to enter the farming industry. So if somebody's willing to do the work, we need to find ways to support them.
Thank you. Quick audience poll. How many of us here are vegetarian or vegan? Hands up. There's not enough of us here. No. Next question is on transportation, and Sheila, you're going first. More fossil fuels are burned in transportation than in any other sector in BC. And improving public transit is one of the best ways to make life more affordable for people on low income. How will you support the expansion of province-wide public transportation that's accessible, safe, efficient, and affordable? Sheila first. To Mike,
Thank you for the question. Absolutely. Expanding public transit has been another one of these win-wins. We get people out of their cars, we have people less isolated, more connected, we're able to move around in our community, and it helps with affordability too. We've already made transit free for children 12 and under, and a lot of us would like to see that expanded. We brought back seniors riding for free on the BC ferries. That was an important thing to roll back from the old Ristad government. We introduced rebates for electric vehicles. We completed BC's electric highway with just a massive expansion of charging infrastructure. We've got, just even more locally, electric buses at School District 68. I understand that the outcomes of that are maybe a little bit measured, but I love the idea that we're trying new ways and new things. And as communities grow, we have to continue to expand public transit. And we, honestly, we're just in such, there's so much ground for us to make up that we finally now have got bus service between Nanaimo and Duncan is a huge breakthrough. I know it's really not perfect yet, but even just the mechanics of having two different regional districts and connecting transit across both of them has been much more difficult than anybody would have thought. So it's still a real nut that we have to crack. We see in the Lower Mainland where investments in infrastructure, in public transit, get thousands and thousands of people out of their vehicles. We're expanding the SkyTrain right out to Langley. Never thought that that was going to be possible, but it's happening. It's coming soon. For us on Vancouver Island, with our lower population density, it's just as important, but the numbers of the climate trade-off aren't quite as huge, and so we have to fight extra hard as Vancouver Island MLAs for similar kind of investment.
Thanks. Sure.
So in the platform that we've released recently is that we are committed to free public transportation with greater capacity. The thing about using public transportation is you have to make sure that it's as easy as possible to use, that it is accessible, that it is financially accessible, and that it's convenient. If it's not convenient, it doesn't always get used. So by expanding, by investing in our public transportation system, and by offering free service, that makes it accessible, and that will make a significant dent in our emissions. So the more people we can get on public transit, the better.
Sheila, response?
I'm not going to debate Shirley because I think these are all really good ideas. But I will add that we've made a real focus of investment, taking action on active transportation, getting in more, identifying places where it's difficult for pedestrians to be and maybe even unsafe, getting in more bicycle lanes. And you know, as Nanaimo people, how controversial these are. So we have, it's been a really significant capital investment, infrastructure investment that the BC government has made. And if that is important to you, please let your family and friends know, because we want to be able to continue to do it. Active transportation, getting people safely out of their vehicles is really going to get us through. Putting incentives for people to buy electric bikes, all these things that really have transformed in quite a short period of time how people can move around in a greenhouse gas emission-free way. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess my focus is on being efficient, available, timely, and easy to use.
So just as a clarification, the Greens, you're promising free public transport for all.
Yes.
The NDP, yes or no? And what about free transit for all students up to age 18?
Mr. Gauncey, you'll have to wait for our platform to come out on that.
No.
I am not going to scoop the Premier. I'm not going to scoop David Eby.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that. The next question is on buildings, and Shirley, you're going first. During the 2021 heat dome, 619 people died from heat stress. This could have been avoided if those people had had heat pumps, which provide heating, cooling, as well as heating. Do you think the province should offer free heat pumps to low and modest income households and to those who have a heightened heat risk, including the elderly and people with disabilities? And Shirley, you're first.
I'm going to say an absolute yes. We need to ensure people are safe, and we're going to be facing climate situations like heat domes more and more, and we need to ensure that people who can't afford to supply the equipment for themselves, that they have access to it.
Thank you.
Yes, and we are right now providing heat pumps free for the people who need them the most, the lowest income people. And I want to give a shout out to Larry Whaley, and put your hand up if you're a heat pump person in the room. You're such great advocates. I'm sorry, are you like a heat pump advocate lobbyist? I mean, there's a smaller group of you. You've been terrific. And so this is an example of local action really making a difference. The policy recommendations and presentation to Minister Josie Osborne really had big impact. The feedback that came from Nanaimo and other places meant that the program was expanded, and so that it now does not require people who are purchasing a heat pump to pay up front and then get their money back later. Rather now the rebate is pre-approved, the contractors take it right off the bill. And there are still, and Minister Osborne asked me, or former Minister Osborne, she's not in the role right now, asked me to make sure I said that. There's still more changes that we can make. But BC now has the most robust heat pump program anywhere in the country other than Prince Edward Island. And in 2022, there were more heat pumps installed than natural gas furnaces in British Columbia, and that is a huge breakthrough.
Sure.
No,
Any follow-through?
Sir, I just want to say that we're definitely moving in the right direction, but we need to keep installing that equipment. We need to make sure that people who need it have it.
Just as clarification, what work Larry's been doing with his colleagues, when he went to install a heat pump, he got quotes that high as 30,000. He realized that the installers were taking the incentive and just pocketing it. And he then, by shopping around, managed to get a heat pump for I believe 11,000, right? And he's been pushing the province to sort of just prevent the installers from doing that and stop them from pocketing the incentives. And congratulations to Larry and friends. Yes, please.
Just in terms of, I was really impressed to see a model that was established on Gabriola, where they actually established a nonprofit where the installations, they're not at a profit. So it's innovations like that, it's thinking creatively. We can do all kinds of things. We just have to apply creativity to how we develop and roll out our programs.
If the whole of BC was run the way Gabriola runs itself, we'd have our problem solved, right? The add-on question. Would you support legislation requiring that all new buildings must be electrically heated now, as Nanaimo has voted to do, rather than wait till 2030, which is the current provincial line? Sheila? This is about the zero carbon step code.
There has been so much work done with building code. There's so much, especially around institutional buildings, that we have been advancing, whether it's pre-wiring, whether it's rainwater collection, whether it's building in mass timber changes to make buildings go up more quickly so that we can get affordable housing built more quickly, seismic upgrades, accessibility requirements, all things that had been completely left behind the last time that John Muscat was in government. In 7 years, we've crammed in so many changes, and honestly, this may not be a popular thing to say in the room and in response to your question, but the building community in Nanaimo and more broadly is saying, please just leave the rules in place just for a couple of years so that we can do all the things. Each of the things you've asked us to do are on their own good, but they are all adding to the cost of construction, and that they have to continue to revise their plans is a challenge. Now, that doesn't speak directly to the policy suggestion that you're making, but I'm feeling that, especially at a time that we need to build more to house more people and house people more affordably. And so I think to require it as a change to the building code in British Columbia, I think is something that would take a very important conversation, and I think this time do it more in concert.
Well, Nanaimo's already made that decision. Shelley?
And that's the thing. I think we can use Nanaimo, and we can use communities that have already gone to the maximum step as the model. If we can do it, why can't other communities do it? It was shocking to me that the city of Vancouver has rolled back their step code.
They've been recommended to do it.
Recommended.
They haven't rolled it back yet.
But it's
in play. It's in play.
It's in play, but there has to be the support, and we really need to push communities to move it along as quickly as they possibly can.
So, have two more questions. One about the carbon tax, which is not in your thing, but how can you not have a question on the carbon tax? 750,000 BC households whose annual incomes are less than 60,000 get a quarterly carbon tax rebate worth between $200 and $800 more than they pay in carbon tax. This makes life more affordable, especially for people with low incomes. Would your party keep or scrap BC's carbon tax? And I've forgotten who's going first. Shirley, you go first.
Well, we've made it pretty clear in terms of in our platform that we will keep the carbon tax, and not only will we keep the carbon tax, but we will actually raise the payments to the low-income families. So we have no intention of repealing it.
Thanks. Sheila.
Your explanation, Guy, is so logical and so accurate, and we have been making it for years, in a most focused way the last 2 years. And yet, the party that wants to throw out all the carbon actions and climate actions that we're taking entirely is neck and neck with the NDP in the polls. And they very well could win government and throw the entire Clean BC program out the door and set back so many of the other conservation options that we've described. So this is where the BC NDP sits right now. Having been the last place in the entire country, the only premier standing up and defending the carbon tax, we have now said that if the federal government rescinds the requirement to have a carbon tax, then we will remove carbon tax provincially from consumers and move it on to polluters.
Thanks.
Just one observation, just in terms of the studies, we know that carbon tax is actually effective worldwide in the meta-studies. We know that it's a very effective tool in our toolkit, and I think we need to continue it.
Okay, thanks. Any questions?
I wish that it were not so. I wish that there were more people like there are in this room who understand that putting a price on pollution is very effective. And as I said before, the greatest risk is electing a government that will throw the entire program out, and then we will go back to protesting in the streets for the next 4 years against a regressive government that wants to roll back every initiative that we have just described between these two parties tonight, and doesn't have the courage to sit at this table and defend their position. And so with such a stark risk and such a stark contrast, because we know that the low carbon fuel standard actually reduces more emissions than the carbon tax does, I want to work very hard to save that. I want to work very hard in this election to save the land conservation, to save the other renewable energy work that we're doing, other ways that we can take emissions out of the air. And if the carbon tax can be removed as a fighting point on the part of Rastad and Pierre Poilievre, then just maybe we'll be able to save the rest of the climate action plan that we have. I wish it were not so, but that's where we sit today.
Thank you. I'm conscious that it's past, it's 8:20, we're finishing at 8:30. We have one more question and then two wrap-up statements. A question about nature. Globally, biodiversity is under extreme pressure. In 2023, the BC government and Indigenous leaders signed an agreement with the federal government to protect 30% of BC's land and water by 2030. Currently, only 15% is protected, and another 4% is under conserved status but not protected. We therefore need to protect a further 125,000 square kilometres of land. What steps will you take to ensure that we can achieve this target within the next 5 years? And Shirley, you're first.
Well, I would say it's a lot of public consultation and consultation with Indigenous communities, because we need to obviously be working hand in hand with our First Nations communities. But I think as the Green Party, I feel that we will be on the right side of history in terms of the goals that we're trying to achieve. And I think that we need to continue in terms of public education, in terms of educating our partners to keep moving forward. And I believe we have the support of the public. I believe most people understand the importance of protecting our natural resources for our children, our grandchildren, and beyond.
Thank you. Sheila.
So this is why I'm here in this role. Although I've been assigned social justice portfolios, I'm here for land protection. And the tripartite agreement that was signed about 11 months ago between BC First Nations, BC government, and federal government is truly groundbreaking. $1 billion already set aside, and a commitment together between 3 levels of government to meet those 30-30 by 30 goals. In addition, for us to have boosted marine conservation, like with the recently signed Great Bear Sea Project for Permanence, 17 First Nations and the BC government and Canada, along with a philanthropic commitment to fund some of that work. This is the fruit of the DRIPA legislation, the UNDRIP legislation, and the building of trusting relationships that is allowing us to sit at tables. And you know, this is not about consultation. This is about doing the work together. And this is all at risk. Again, John Rastad has said there is too much conservation. There will be no more under his government. He will dial back the work that we've already done. And this is the extreme danger that we face in this election, and why it's so important that people like you are here in this hall to give voice to doing things in the right way, doing things with First Nations, and locking in the protections that will benefit future generations of British Columbians.
Thank you. before we get to the closing statements, two short announcements. This Saturday morning, there's a similar debate for the Nanaimo-Gabriola electoral district at location.
Wellington Hall.
Another Wellington. It's Wellington Hall as opposed to Wellington Street. Wellington Hall, right. So that's 10 o'clock. So if you want to know if you're living in that riding, electoral area. And secondly, tomorrow is the National Seniors Climate Day of Action. This is a federal action with actions all across the country in 75 locations. If you want to join it, people are gathering at Sheila Malcolmson's office.
Not my office.
495 Donsdale Street. No, it's not. Well, your ex-office.
It's not my office.
That location, 495 Donsdale Street, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. For all seniors like myself and all of us grey hairs, right? Closing statements. Who started things off? Sheila, you're first, I think, with closing statements. No. Shirley, you're first, because you started things. You're first. Yes. 2 minutes.
So I won't belabor the point here, but I just want everybody to think about when you're going to the polls on October 19th. We've seen things happening in the province that are deeply concerning. So I ask you, you can ask my position on things, but I want you to reflect on what you want, what you envision for the province of British Columbia in the future. One of the things you might want to think about is, I think very often when I think about the leadership in the BC Green Party, I'm very proud of the values of the party, and I'm very proud of the leadership of Sonia Furstenau. So I'd like you to ask yourself some of these questions. Would Sonia Furstenau paramilitarize our RCMP to intimidate and brutalize land defenders on traditional unceded territories? Would Sonia Furstenau do her utmost to engage and consult with First Nations communities to seek informed consent prior to undertaking projects on traditional unceded territories? Do you think Sonia Furstenau would attempt to circumvent any steps of the Environmental Protection Act to expedite a project of any kind, short of a catastrophic emergency? Do you think Sonia Furstenau would entertain any lobby group in her office up to 80 times in 1 month? Do you think Sonia Furstenau would waffle or sell out on any of our policies due to industry influence, intimidation, or pressure? These questions I submit to you, and I humbly ask that you reflect upon them before casting your vote on October 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. And thank you again to the Climate Action Group for hosting us tonight, and for coming with your values and with your priorities. That is refreshing, really refreshing to hear. The action that we have been able to take already, despite two global health emergencies and unprecedented disruption in economy and community, that we have still been able to take action and move forward on removing fish farms, on protecting land, on banning the trophy hunt for grizzly bears in British Columbia, to have cleaned thousands and thousands of kilometers of shoreline of ocean plastic. Some of them have been sitting for decades. For us to have been able to come together, especially with nations, to identify and protect land, that is forever work, and it has been just an honor to be able to see that unfold and to be doing that shoulder to shoulder with community organizations that are working in support. That in contrast, we have such a choice in this election that the conservative commitment, the pieces that have been said that they will do to turn back action on climate, to turn back action on conservation, to turn back action on Indigenous reconciliation is a stark choice, a serious choice, and I welcome anybody that wants to join our campaign and continue to knock doors and talk with people about the risks that we face together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your vote.
Thank you. In closing, I want to thank both our candidates, Sheila and Shirley, Catherine, Jane, and Kevin, for volunteering and all the other volunteers who have helped out, and the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. And I want to pass the mic back to them.
Right, thank you, Guy. I'm very exhausted. Sheila and Shirley, you must be very excited. Your energy level is amazing, and I know you're just in this stretch now where you're just calling upon all those energy reserves to get you to the 19th. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you both, and thank you, Guy, for doing such a great job moderating tonight. If you have not yet become a member of the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub, please do so. Go to our website, become a member, subscribe to our newsletter. If you would like to make a donation to help us pay for this event and other things that we're doing in the community, there is a jar at the back of the room, but you can also e-transfer to nanaimo-climateaction@gmail.com. We take e-transfers. We're very happy to do so. Thank you once again, everybody. There's one more little quick announcement. Tomorrow night, at the library downtown, there is a showing, a TED Talks showing. What time? 5:30. At 5:30. EcoFlix is putting this on. It's a great TED Talk, all about the tough stuff we need to think about, but also all the solutions we need to also be thinking about. So lots going on. Go to the seniors thing tomorrow afternoon with your rocking chair and food, then go on up to the library. It's a full day tomorrow, full month of things, including, don't forget to go vote on October 19th. Is there one more point?
Conservatives be present at the Saturday.
We sure tried. That's the one that we did get a positive response from, a confirmation of attendance, and then a decline in the last few days. So, unfortunately, we will not have a Conservative candidate at the event on Saturday. What can I say?
So final thank you to our two candidates here. Big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.